Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started and kick off things by welcoming you to our new webinar. Today, we're going to dive into this powerful ingredient a little bit more, giving you some information as it relates to the past, present, and future of CBD. We've got a lot to cover over the next 30 minutes, but we'll stay on at the end of the presentation to answer any questions that you might have that we didn't get to during the presentation. So if you have any questions at any time, please type those into the question and answer section of Zoom, and we'll be sure to get to those questions if we don't cover them during the material. So let's go ahead and get started. Just a quick legal disclaimer, we're providing this information for educational purposes only. We ask that anything we cover as a forward-looking statement not be used for investment purposes. Please make all your investment and purchasing decisions based on what's available today, and of course, today's information is not intended as a product, labeling recommendation, or claim substantiation discussion. So as we're getting started, we just wanted to make sure and introduce you to the two voices that you'll be hearing from today. My name is Crystal, and I'm National Technical Sales here at Integrated CBD. I'm a registered dietitian with a wealth of experience in nutrition and food science, from nutrition counseling in private practice and oncology settings to hands-on finished product R&D and bulk ingredient commercialization for food, beverage, and dietary supplement companies over the past 20 years.
And my name is Tyler Horton. I'm the head of product here at Integrated CBD. And while I've actually only been in this position for a couple of months, I come to Integrated CBD from the dietary supplement world, where I have about 10 years of experience in the formulation, development, launch, marketing, and management of dietary supplement brands in pretty much any category from general health to weight loss, sports nutrition, skincare, and most recently, CBD tincture and topical products. We're both super excited to be here with y'all today to share some insights that will hopefully shed some light on this exciting ingredient and the trends that we're seeing as we head into 2020. So I know several of you have attended our webinars before, but for those joining us for the first time today, let me just give a real quick overview of who Integrated CBD is. So we are a vertically integrated supplier of the highest quality organically grown hemp and hemp-derived CBD in the nation, and we do this at an institutional scale. We cultivate our industrial hemp on one of the country's largest certified organic farms located down in southern Arizona in Yuma County. Now, when most people think of Arizona, they think of a dry, hot desert, but fun fact, Crystal, did you know that Yuma County is actually known as the nation's winter salad bowl?
Winter salad bowl? Really? Why is that, Tyler?
That's because during the winter months, Arizona provides 90% of all the leafy greens in the nation. We have great year-round growing conditions and pretty predictable weather, which makes us not only a great location to grow crops like lettuce, almonds, and dates, but also an ideal place to grow industrial hemp. Our mission at ICBD is to create the safe and reliable supply chain needed by multinational corporations. And when we say integrated, we truly mean integrated, from proprietary seed genetics and breeding, cultivation, and food-grade extraction and distillation, to produce commercial scale products from certified organic, single-origin USA hemp. So that's Integrated CBD in a nutshell, or should I say hemp seed?
Oh, hemp seed. I like what you did there, Tyler.
Sorry about that.
I'm going to have to save that one and use it. Well, I love how strongly we believe in full transparency here at Integrated CBD. The best part about having all that fully integrated data and supply chain is the ability to share it with everyone. We have an exclusive partnership with Verified Organic, which is a blockchain platform that irreversibly records and tracks all of the growing, harvesting, extract data, and processes, so we can provide our clients and consumers with a fully traceable picture of our single origin product's journey from seed to C of A. So you know exactly what you're buying each time, a 100% guarantee that what you approve is what you receive. And speaking of transparency, let's talk about what it is we plan to cover in today's seminar. Today, we're going to discuss with you a brief history of CBD and its pathway from the early CBD products to those currently being sold on the market. We have to touch on the exciting developments on CBD regulation in the news this month and a few other key regulations that mold the CBD industry into what it is today, which will be a wonderful segue to chat with Tyler about CBD market trends and that are changing even more quickly than the regulatory landscape. As you mentioned earlier, we'll be sure to leave time for questions at the end. We love hearing from you so we can design our future webinars around topics that matter to you and are helpful.
Okay, so Crystal, even though CBD, which comes from hemp, seems like a new buzzworthy ingredient, and you're probably seeing it at every 7-Eleven and hair salon that you go to, the fact is that hemp has been around forever, right? So, Crystal, if you don't mind, why don't you give us just a brief lesson on the history of hemp?
Absolutely, Tyler, that's a really good point. Cannabis sativa is one of the oldest plants known to be cultivated by humans. Evidence of fiber from hemp dates back as early as 8,000 BC, and that was found in the Oki Islands of Japan. It was also documented in later years as being used to make hemp, rope, paper, clothing, textiles, and more. As far back as the Han Dynasty, parts of the cannabis plant were used as a regular part of the food supply. Documentation of cannabis for medical use dates back to the ancient Chinese culture as early as 2900 BC and was included in the oldest pharmacopoeia in the world around 1500 BC. It's still widely used in Chinese medicine today for bowel irregularities, skin issues, and much, much more. India, too, has a rich history in cannabis for medical use for a wide variety of targets, and it's estimated to be used there since 1000 BC. Records of cannabis for health uses appear in the history of Persian, Assyrian, and Tibetan cultures as well.
So, okay, globally and historically, hemp has been pretty prominent in human culture, but skipping forward to more recent history, and specifically here in the U.S., hemp is a new crop. A lot of people don't realize this, but in colonial America, farmers were actually required to devote a certain amount of their acreage to growing hemp, mainly because it had so many uses, including rope, cordage, feed for livestock, housing material, and even as clothing. In fact, a bunch of our founding fathers, including Thomas Jefferson and George Washington, grew hemp. And even more interesting, many of the first American flags were made with hemp cloth, including the one made by Betsy Ross. So, how did hemp go from being such a common crop to something that was basically banned in the United States? Well, it all started in 1937 with the Marijuana Tax Act. This is actually one of the first times you'll see the cannabis plant, or hemp, become associated with the drug marijuana. That term wasn't even widely used at the time, but more on that later. Essentially, the Marijuana Tax Act imposed steep taxes on hemp products, including a tax that any doctor or pharmacist had to pay for prescribing or selling cannabis for medical use, which was not uncommon at the time. The American Medical Association even opposed this act, but regardless, it passed. Many opposed it was because no one called cannabis hemp marijuana at the time, so they didn't even realize what they were voting on. You could still get cannabis for medical needs, but it became difficult and expensive. And with many people being arrested for using cannabis without a prescription, the plant unfairly got a bad rap. So, Crystal, with the commercial growth and consumer use of hemp essentially brought to a halt in 1937, how did we get where we are today with the latest scientific advances in cannabidiol?
So when we speak to the modern discovery of CBD, it began nearly a century ago in the 1940s when a U.S. chemist, Roger Adams, first successfully extracted CBD from cannabis. The material he extracted, though, remained unidentified for years afterwards. Scientists began studying CBD for potential health benefits, most notably in 1986, in Dr. Walter S. Lowe's animal study, which proved that CBD did not exhibit the typical psychoactive results, that high you kind of associate with recreational cannabis use. Meanwhile, Israeli Dr. Raphael Mechoulam, noted godfather of the cannabinoid research, fully identified stereochemistry or 3D configuration of CBD, so we had a full vision of what the molecule finally looked like. More advanced animal studies continued on, leading to the first commercial CBD oil being released by the British Pharmacopoeia in the 1960s. Now, this was exciting because it was the very first known government-backed cannabis-based medication that was allowed to be sold to the public. In 1970, the Controlled Substances Act was passed in the U.S., which was even more restrictive on cannabis and accessibility than the Marijuana Tax Act. Research on CBD continued to evolve. A 1980 landmark human clinical by Dr. Mechoulam linked CBD to a reduction in symptoms of epilepsy. Dr. Mechoulam's groundbreaking cannabinoid research was essential to the discovery of the endocannabinoid system in the 1990s, a system of receptors found in the body that interact directly with plant cannabinoids. From there, the interest in cannabinoids for therapeutic uses and the entourage effect was unstoppable.
Interesting. So it was a U.S. chemist who first discovered and isolated cannabidiol, but with how restrictive regulations around hemp were in the U.S., that probably made it nearly impossible to conduct scientific studies. Luckily, the Israelis were able to carry the work and lead the way with our understanding of CBD. So I know we touched on this a little bit in our last webinar, but we should probably just briefly reiterate what the difference is between hemp, cannabis, and marijuana as it stands today. Crystal, can you give us just a high-level overview?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Tyler. Luckily, even during the Prohibition era, you mentioned under the Marijuana Tax Act, there were still limited legal pathways for scientific research to continue, and thankfully research in other countries continued on. So marijuana, the actual term, is slang for cannabis, used recreationally to get the psychoactive feeling of being high from the THC that's found in cannabis. Since the term marijuana was used as part of those scare tactics to promote cannabis prohibition by associating the whole cannabis plant with a negative connotation of people just using it to get high, I instead refer to that high THC cannabis that's used as a recreational drug as recreational cannabis instead of marijuana. This recreational cannabis and hemp both come from the same plant, Cannabis sativa. But what really separates the two is the amount of THC present in the plant material. Strains, or more accurately cultivars, of Cannabis sativa that are specifically bred to have high amounts of THC and moderate to low amounts of CBD are grown for recreational cannabis or medical cannabis in states where that's allowed. Hemp, on the other hand, comes from cultivars of Cannabis sativa specifically bred to be extremely low in THC but high in CBD. And as you know, lots of farms are growing hemp in order to extract the CBD, but hemp also has wealthy uses in other industries as well, just like other hardy, stocky plants like bamboo and jute. The 2018 Farm Bill set forth very specific guidelines for what to consider as industrial hemp as follows. Cannabis plants cannot be industrial hemp if they contain more than 0.3% THC. Anything below 0.3% THC content is considered hemp and federally legal to grow, sell, and transport. Anything above that 0.3% is considered to be a crop intended for recreational and medical use and is tightly controlled by federal and state laws. In short, we really are talking about exactly the same plant when we speak on recreational cannabis, formerly known as marijuana, medical cannabis, and industrial hemp. The only difference is that people are dividing them up by cultivars or plant characteristics based on that THC content. So for example, this is just like apples, right? They're all the same plant, but you might select a specific strain or cultivar for a certain purpose, such as the firm, hardy Granny Smith apple for baking, since they hold their shape better in heat, whereas the red delicious apple is great for salad because it's instantly sweet and has a bright red pop of color.
I think that's a very helpful analogy. Thank you for that. So now that we have a better understanding of the proper terminology to use when we're discussing the world of CBD, where do we stand today in regards to the regulatory climate around hemp?
Well, Tyler, there's certainly a lot of work ahead on the scientific front to learn as much as we can about these fascinating cannabinoids and how they interact with the human body. There's also a lot of work to be done on the regulation side. There's a good number of people that remain opposed to the use of any compounds coming from cannabis, including CBD. This is largely due to the need for education and updates to these antiquated stigmas that hang around, particularly on the differences between CBD-containing extracts from industrial hemp versus the higher THC-containing cannabis products and plants for medical and recreational use. CBD acceptance is still not fully normalized across the country. Some states are particularly rigid in this area. Though the 2018 Farm Bill we touched on earlier removes CBD and hemp from the list of scheduled drugs, and the CBD naturally occurring from industrial hemp is federally legal substance, more guidance from the FDA is needed to address challenges that exist on a state-by-state basis and on how manufacturers can use that substance, CBD, to make consumer-facing products. The perception towards CBD is shifting favorably and rapidly as time goes on. In October, the USDA published the interim final rule for the Domestic Hemp Production Program, which establishes federal regulatory oversight of the production of hemp in the United States. The comment period actually ends today on that. The target goal for this Domestic Hemp Production Program is to make the regulatory framework around the U.S. hemp production more consistent on a state-by-state basis. And earlier this month, a bipartisan group of lawmakers in the House of Representatives introduced Bill 5587, a bill that would amend the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act to classify hemp-derived CBD as a dietary supplement, just pretty much the same as vitamins and minerals, paving the way for the FDA to move forward and finalize decisions on where and how CBD can be used as an ingredient.
Great. So thank you for that recap. It sounds like, we're slowly getting there, but definitely still some room for some clarity to come down from the government.
Agreed.
And when we look at it by a state-by-state basis, that still varies kind of greatly on whether or not you can grow cannabis or hemp. Isn't that right?
That's absolutely right. It's getting better, but if you take a look at this map here, of course we have to stay tuned for these final comments to come in on that Domestic Hemp Production Program. But this map shows where we stand today as far as where industrial hemp can be grown.
And so how has this sort of regulatory limitations affected the clinical study of hemp?
Research on CBD and other key cannabinoids continues to evolve today. Back in 1970, with the passage of that Controlled Substances Act in the U.S., all use of cannabis on a federal level was effectively prohibited. Due to the realities and complications of researching components of the plant while it was considered illegal, the U.S. unfortunately fell decades behind in cannabis research pace. However, preliminary human research for the U.S. in CBD and for potential health benefits is promising, and there's numerous exciting CBD studies ongoing today. To find the most up-to-date ongoing and published research on CBD and other cannabinoids, There are a few really good resources out there that I recommend. PubMed is a good source for review studies and has about 70 published clinicals on CBD, which are targeting areas of inflammatory processes and social anxiety. A similarly valuable database is clinicaltrials.gov, which lists over 600 studies in process worldwide. Of those studies, 247 are from the United States alone, mainly run by medical school programs, research hospitals, and clinics. The International Association for Cannabinoid Medicines is a scientific association advocating for the use of cannabinoids to be legally accessible by promoting quality research and providing education.
Thank you so much for that really helpful and in-depth recap of where we stand from a regulatory and clinical research standpoint. So as the sort of CBD world opens up to commercial products, and you live very much in the ingredient supply side, you're the expert there, what are you seeing in the terms of commercial products that contain CBD?
So on the commercial product side, since that early 1960s cannabis tincture released by the British it's probably like a simple tincture just made with CBD and alcohol. CBD has sure come a long way since then. In 1978, New Mexico recognized cannabis as a medicine, and similar tinctures became available to the public. In the 80s and 90s, here in the USA, CBD, separately from THC and its associated, psychoactive side effects, grew in popularity, primarily by word-of-mouth accounts of therapeutic uses. It was not an easy thing to find in the marketplace, though. But when California became the first state to legalize medical cannabis program in 1996, and other states followed suit over the years, some even legalizing cannabis for adult recreational use, that's when access to CBD products became more widely available at a very rapid pace. These regulation changes we've been talking about and the development of a true retail market pathway allowed for a solid foundation to the CBD industry as we know it today. With this emerging market came the evolution of CBD offerings from simple alcohol and oil-based tinctures and topicals to new and innovative ways to deliver CBD. A wide variety of CBD products can now be found online and in major retail stores across the country.
Great. So we've kind of covered the history of hemp and CBD to date. Now we're going to kind of move into talking about where we are right now from a product standpoint and where the market is headed. The slide that you're looking at right now, it has a stat that's been really popular and recirculated. You've probably read it several times over the past year and a half to 2 years. The Brightfield Group, which is the really great resource for intelligence on the CBD market, announced that they're projected that by 2023, the U.S. CBD market would hit $24 billion. And they just this past summer in 2019 updated that to $25 billion by 2025. You will see some other more conservative estimates, but this is the one that's really kind of has sparked everyone and got them excited about the opportunity that exists with CBD. When we look at the different market projections by category, so in the center column here in the gray, we have the 2024 estimated U.S. spending on CBD, and as you can see, food and beverage leads the way, about $8 billion, followed by wellness supplements, beauty, skin, pet, and other. I think in that food and beverage category, you're going to see a lot of interesting things happen, specifically on the beverage side as the water-soluble technology around CBD advances and becomes a little less expensive. I think people are really looking for healthier alternatives to sugary sodas and coffees. That's why we're seeing, the popularity of flavored waters and low-calorie juice drinks. So I think infusing CBD is just a natural evolution of that, and so I expect to see a lot of growth there. And then the purple column, it shows you where our most popular CBD categories are right now, with ingestibles at the top, followed by topicals. And one thing I keep in mind is just that as you put on your product development hats and you kind of, pull out your globe and try to figure out where you're going in the future, is to be open to flexibility, because there is so much change happening in the CBD market right now, that what's popular today may not be popular tomorrow. So just be prepared for things to change. I think that it is kind of smart to look to the THC world when we get our product categories, even though a lot of us in the CBD world want to create a hard line between CBD and THC. There's still a lot of overlap in these sort of product applications. And then another area that I would look at would be, just like I said, beverage brands. I think you're going to see a lot of the CBD world take cues from specifically like alcoholic beverage brands. Moving on, we'll talk about tinctures. So tinctures right now are basically the common currency of the CBD world. the market is still heavily dominated by tincture products. As Crystal mentioned earlier, tincture is basically a combination of CBD with an oil carrier. Typically, it's MCT oil from coconuts, but you'll also see olive oil, hemp oil, and I've seen some more other exotic oil blends used as carriers. A tincture delivery is probably going to seem a little odd or antiquated to most consumers. Unless you're really into herbal extracts or essential oils, you've probably never even used a tincture before. But tinctures are still one of the most effective ways to use CBD. And that's because cannabidiol is an oil. It's hydrophobic, which basically just means that it doesn't like water or mix well with water. That also makes it difficult for the body to absorb CBD on its own. Tinctures work well because the carrier oil helps to carry CBD across the thin membrane of skin in the mouth, specifically under the tongue and directly into the blood vessels. That's why the usage instructions for most tincture products direct the user to hold a few drops of product on the tongue for 10 to 20 seconds. Another reason tinctures are still quite popular is that they're pretty simple to formulate. They don't require long lead times, and they don't require sophisticated equipment. So although tinctures may seem a little old-fashioned, there are definitely ways to make your formulations more interesting. For example, adding functional ingredients like melatonin or chamomile to support sleep, St. John's wort to support mood, or B vitamins to support energy. And of course, flavor is a huge component of any CBD tincture product. With a full spectrum tincture, you're going to have more of that earthy, natural terpene flavor, which is going to require a little more flavor work if you're looking to mask it. Although some people actually prefer that hemp taste and associate it with being a more natural product, so that's something to consider when you're formulating. Many flavored tinctures also use a natural sweetener like stevia to help enhance that flavor. And as far as the most popular flavors go, natural unflavored tinctures are still the most common, followed by mint, citrus, and berry flavors. But as the market matures, you're really starting to see some really interesting flavor combinations out there, like strawberry banana, pina colada, peach mango. Tropical flavors are really on trend in the beverage world right now, and you can see the CBD tincture market taking some of its cues there. Another reason that tinctures are so popular is because of their bioavailability. There's countless of other delivery systems like sprays, gummies, chews, and chocolates. And like I said, as the water-soluble technology advances, we're seeing more and more CBD beverages. But something to consider when deciding on what format to use is the bioavailability of the CBD within the body. The ideal delivery would be sublingual, which, like I said, literally means under the tongue. But when we start getting into products that you would actually ingest, that bioavailability of CBD decreases fairly significantly once it reaches the gut. So you want to ensure that your customers are receiving the maximum benefit from your products, and if they're not absorbing it, they're not going to be a repeat customer. That's not to say you shouldn't pursue an edible format, but you may want to adjust your recommended use to encourage your customer to chew slowly, savor, and enjoy the flavor before swallowing. And just one key takeaway is to choose a CBD partner that really understands the ingredient and how it works across various applications, just to make sure you're offering something that's truly effective to your customers and they're going to be a repeat user.
That is so much great information, Tyler. I really love the information on bioavailability, such an important factor to keep your eye on when formulating, and some of those flavor and growth trends really surprise me. What else are you seeing in the market these days?
So let's take a second and talk about what the CBD consumer looks like who's purchasing all these tinctures and topicals and gummies. What does the average CBD consumer look like? The short answer is there is no short answer. The CBD consumer crosses most age, gender, and socioeconomic boundaries, with representation in Gen Z, Millennial, Gen X, and Baby Boomer. But we can help to identify a few trends. And again, I should note, it can be difficult to find CBD-specific data. A lot of our sources commingle recreational cannabis with CBD, but there's still a lot of commonalities between the two categories in terms of user profiles. So, a State of Cannabis report by ease.com tells us that specifically speaking about CBD, baby boomers are the most common enthusiasts of all age groups, and female boomers are the most likely CBD users. Now, if we zoom out to include the entire cannabis industry, boomers are still the largest spenders in the cannabis category, outspending Gen Z by nearly 53%. Across the category, women users are increasing and are expected to be on par with male users by 2022. Still, the boomers are the fastest growing demographic and they spend the most. The average age of the cannabis user is 31, which is squarely within the millennial demo. So as you can see, it really goes across all boundaries. According to the National Cannabis Industry Association, there's a three-way tie for the top purchase driver of CBD, with temporary pain, anxiety, and chronic pain leading the pack, followed closely by sleep and wellness. We're seeing that across the board, consumers are seeking out cannabis and CBD as alternatives to alcohol and opioid pain medication. All of this just points to a normalization in the general public attitude toward cannabis, whether the product is CBD-focused or THC-focused. And this is kind of a fun side that I found while prepping for this webinar. Traditionally, April 20th, which is 4/20, has always been the largest sales day for legalized marijuana products in the U.S. But in 2018, the new holiday of Green Wednesday, which precedes Thanksgiving and Black Friday, far exceeded 4/20 sales. So I think this just goes to show you that, cannabis is becoming almost as popular as Black Friday.
Wow, that is really interesting. So much good information, a lot of great take-home points there. It sounds like our consumers in our market have they can take a lot of different approaches on getting to the market as far as different types of products that they're building and differentiation. So it seems like there's almost something out there for everyone if they're looking to get into a CBD.
There's so many different entry points. There's so many options. It's really exciting. Like it's a really versatile ingredient. There are certain limitations, but as long as you know what those limitations are, I think you can create something really fun that your consumers will love. And I think we're going to wrap up the presentation now, but Crystal and I, we are here as resources for you. One of the things that Integrated, prides itself on being is truly integrated. And so we're always here to help answer your questions, to bounce ideas off. And here's our email address if you ever want to reach out to us directly. And I think that's it, Crystal?
Yeah, I think that's it from my end, too. A lot of great information. Like I said, thank you, Tyler. Again, reach out to us at any time if you have any questions. If there are any questions that are coming through for the seminar, we can touch on those as well. So we'll just maybe take a brief pause and see what we're getting in.
Okay, so let's see. How can you trust a C of A? I think that's a great question. So those of you who maybe don't know, a C of A stands for Certificate of Analysis. And essentially that is that contains the lab results that you would get on any type of ingredient you would use in a food, beverage, dietary supplement, cosmetic, whatever it may be. With CBD C of A's, you're typically looking at the potency, how much CBD or how much THC is in the product. And then you're also looking for like terpene profiles. That's really important to look at, especially if you're wanting that sort of full spectrum entourage benefit. You want to look for presence of minor cannabinoids like CBA, CBG, CBN. And then also you want to make sure there's no like residual solvents, pesticides, things like that. You should any supplier or brand worth their salt should be totally transparent with their C of A's and have no problem sharing them. Most brands these days actually have a C of A right on the product page on their website. I think New York State recently passed a law that's required. Having a good, clear, understandable C of A is definitely the way to go.
I agree. It's so important for consumers to be diligent and making sure that they're able to trust their source. So when you get a C of A rather, when the QR code is there, you can trace it not only back to the verified test results, but with Integrated CBD, you can trace it all the way back to the seed. So you want to be able to trust your vendor, and you want to make sure that they're verifying that the information there is accurate.
And then we have a question, what are your thoughts on regulating definitions like hemp extract, full spectrum, et cetera? That's a good question, and I think what you'll see is that it varies greatly within the marketplace, which can be kind of frustrating. So I think that if the government does provide some clarification on the regulations, that would help, because as a consumer, it can be quite confusing on, what is full spectrum, what is broad spectrum, what is an isolate. At Integrated, we define full spectrum as anything that still contains 0.3% or less THC, but it still retains a lot of the terpenes, minor cannabinoids, et cetera. And then broad spectrum would be anything 0.10% or less. Did I say that right, Crystal?
Yep, that's exactly right. Yep, so we have the non-detectable on the broad spectrum, less than 0.3% on the full spectrum. And like Tyler said, there's not any regulatory body that's building definitions for these at this point, so it's kind of important for people to go in with an idea of what they're looking for, whether it be a full cannabinoid profile or a full terpene profile or non-detectable THC. So sort of backing into what your expectations are instead of relying on these terms might be a better approach until we have more guidance.
And from a brand standpoint, I think it's a good idea to always clearly define what you consider broad or full to be. Like, as long as you're being transparent and you say, okay, this is what we consider broad spectrum to be, and your consumers can see that, then I think that goes a long way.
Exactly. It's a lot like where there's not, firm definitions for clean label and natural on food packaging, but, if you put them on the front of pack, you better be able to back up what you mean by that and be able to have that transparency to consumers.
So it looks like that's all the questions we have today. Just once again, we both wanted to thank you all for being here, and please stay tuned for information on our webinar next month. That'll be coming in the email shortly. And just real quickly to recap our mission, purpose, and values. We want to be the preeminent supplier of organically grown and sustainably sourced phytocannabinoids. We're really serious about providing affordable access to the life-changing benefits of phytocannabinoids. We're all about being all in, helping our team members, customers, and industry partners. We want to be the leaders in innovation and have partners that are also leaders in innovation, and work with honesty and integrity. So thank you all for being here, and we will talk to you next month.